Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Eryn and this is Eryn Brought a Book, and today the book I brought is The Hunger Games. I'm in the middle of a full trilogy reread right now because if you haven't heard yet, Suzanne Collins released a new Hunger Games book this week. It's called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it's a prequel about President Coriolanus. Coriolanus Snow. that's not his name. Coriolanus, I think. Hang on, now I have to go see how they pronounce it in the movie.
Between 1605 and 1608, the play is based on the life of the legendary Roman leader Caius Marcius Coriolanus. So how do you go about pronouncing it? I've just said it. Coriolanus. Coriolanus.
There you have it. Okay, I didn't know that. Anyways, it's a prequel about President Snow, and I have not started reading it, but I'm planning to over the weekend, and I will be releasing a review of this next week. I'm going to be putting out videos every Tuesday and Friday. If you want to subscribe, stick around and hear more of my bookish thoughts. Okay, let's do this. In preparation for reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I have been rereading the entire original trilogy. I'm studying up, I'm preparing my brain, I'm getting a refresher on everything that's happened up until this point in this story. I read these books when they first came out. I was in 8th grade, I remember. Hey, Sal, off. Don't make me stand up, I will. Okay. So I was on the early end of the Hunger Games wave. I liked Hunger Games before it was cool. And I wish I could experience it again for the first time. There are just so many epic moments. By the way, I'm going to be casually dropping spoilers for the entire first trilogy, so if you somehow at this point still have not read the books or seen the movies, I highly encourage you, pause this video, go watch those. You don't want things to be spoiled, trust me. I wish that I could go back and erase my memories so that I could experience this for the first time. For example, pause so that all of the newbies can get out of the video. Okay, now that it's just us, can you guys believe there was ever a time in your life when you didn't know about the I Volunteer as Tribute moment? Now it's so famous, it's so iconic. I'm sure there have been many memes made about it. But yeah, there was a time in your life and in my life when that moment in the book made us go. However, even though I'm sad that I never get to experience those iconic moments again for the first time, it has been nice coming back to the series with fresh eyes because now I notice so many more of the little details that Suzanne Collins has been planting from book to book, setting up the overarching themes, the symbols that are used throughout the trilogy, foreshadowing big events, foreshadowing moments of tension, creating tension with foreshadowing. It's been really cool. She's obviously a very talented writer. This book was obviously very well edited, tightly plotted, excellent pacing, fantastic root-worthy characters, rootable for characters you can root for. In today's video, I wanted to do a deep dive into some of the major symbols that are set up in the first book of the trilogy. There is no doubt in my mind that everything I'm about to talk about was done intentionally, was planned out in advance, and are some of the reasons that the story is still so compelling. More than a decade after its initial release, and after 4 hit blockbuster movies have been released, still, the original book is quite powerful. I'm going to talk about why. Using symbols. Let's dig in. The first symbol I want to talk about is fire. From the very beginning of the first book and throughout the trilogy, Katniss Everdeen is very strongly associated with fire. She comes from District 12, which is the coal mining capital of Panem, and somehow her stylist, Cinna, is the first stylist in 74 years or whatever who has made the connection between coal and fire and decided to capitalize on that in his design. I don't know how the other stylists didn't see that connection blatantly obvious before. Well, whatever. Back in the day, they literally just had tributes walking out naked, covered with soot, and I guess that was seen as a good way to honor the district that they came from. Okay, I get it. Like, at this point, 90% of the world's population has died out. Maybe all the good stylists died, but, you know. You've also had 74 years for some new good stylists to be born, so this is a tangent. We don't have time for tangents in this video. This is supposed to be a focused, analytical analysis. Anyway, Cinna is the first who is able to capitalize on this connection between coal and fire. Coal in itself is not very impressive, but what coal produces, what coal helps to sustain, fire, is very powerful. He dresses her in literal flames. Her jumpsuit or whatever has flames coming out of it. She talks about being scared of the flames in the book and not wanting to get burned. He has to reassure her, no, it's fine, they're fake. It's not going to burn you. But the symbolism is real, and that's important. From that point forward, from her first appearance in Cinna's flaming outfit, she is known as the Girl on Fire. And even though Peeta Mellark, her co-tribute, was also dressed in a flaming outfit, he just gets to be the boy with the bread, which I think, there's some symbolism there in its own right, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video, so blah, blah, blah. Anyways, but why is this? Why is Katniss known as the Girl on Fire, but Peeta is not known as the Boy on Fire? I think there are at least 3 reasons. Reason number 1, fire means survival. In a sense, Katniss has been shaped into who she is by fire. Her father died a fiery death in a coal mining explosion when she was like 11, and that event ended up crushing her mother with grief. She just became numb to the world for quite a time and left Katniss and Prim to be able to fend for themselves. So at the ripe age of 11, Katniss has taken on the responsibility of being the sole provider for her family, for her mom, for her sister, and for herself. It makes her value self-sufficiency above all else. She hates accepting favors from people. She's uncomfortable even accepting kindness from people. She hates feeling like she owes somebody something. She has to feel like nobody has any strings attached to her, right? Even her name is connected to self-sufficiency. Katniss. It's the plant I was named for, and I heard my father's voice joking, as long as you can find yourself, you'll never starve. So even just her name reinforces the idea that Katniss has to be self-sufficient to survive. She is a survivor. That's how she's made it this far. That's how she wins the games. If you've ever seen the show Survivor, which I happen to be a huge fan of, then you know my boy Jeff Probst talks about fire being your life in the game.
This is part of the ritual at Tribal Council because in this game, fire still represents your life, and when your fire's gone, so are you, and that is going to be the case for somebody tonight.
In a wilderness context, like the Hunger Games arenas, fire is indeed the difference between life and death. Fire is essential for survival. Throughout the book, we see different tributes lighting fires to cook food, to stay warm at night. However, we also see that fire can be dangerous. One tribute is killed after the other tributes see the smoke from her fire and then find her. And obviously, fire can also be weaponized, which brings me to my next point. Fire is a weapon. Fire is dangerous. We all learned that from a young age. Touch a hot stove, you're gonna get burned. Don't put your hand in an open flame. This is pretty basic human knowledge that we all gain at one point or another. The game makers weaponize fire against Katniss and the other tributes by sending this giant, flaming wall through the forest, and even these fireballs chucking at her to get her to run towards the other tributes and accelerate the pace of the game. And it's heavily implied in the book that she would have died from the burn injuries she sustained if she hadn't received the burn ointment treatment cream as a sponsorship gift. There's an old saying that goes, fight fire with fire. And Katniss doesn't know it yet, but she herself is going to become a weapon against the game makers, against the Capitol, against the whole corrupt system. This becomes much more apparent in the second and third books as she kind of evolves from unwilling participant into unwilling political figurehead, and she does become the weapon that ultimately takes down the whole corrupt power structure. And this brings me to my last reason why Katniss is so closely associated with fire. Fire is ignition. It is explosive. It is unwieldy. It can be difficult to control. By the end of the first book, the Capitol realizes that Katniss has outmaneuvered them. She has committed subtle acts of resistance by humanizing Rue in her death, by refusing the game makers a single victor. They recognize the danger that she poses before she even realizes that she has power. By the end of book 1, she still doesn't even know that it's coming, but Katniss is the spark that ignites the rebellion that this whole story is about. She is the one who ends up mobilizing people, stirs them out of their resignation to the world around them, and gets them to turn into freedom fighters. This is a pretty big deal. I mean, at this point in this story, these people have been living under brutal oppression for generations. When we open the trilogy, we open on a world that is very clearly resigned to its evils. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles, many who have long since stopped trying to scrub the coal dust out of their broken nails, the lines of their sunken faces. Crimes are brutally punished by death, by public whipping, by public execution, by cutting your tongue out of your head and forcing you into this weird, subclass of people who only exist to serve the Capitol. And it's not that people are happy about this. It's not that people are okay with this. It's not like people are content to live like this. But Katniss herself points it out at one point in the book. She's talking about, I guess, at school they have to endure a weekly lecture on the history of Panem. And Katniss says, "It's mostly a lot of blather about what we owe the Capitol. I know there must be more than they're telling us, an actual account of what happened during the rebellion. But I don't spend much time thinking about it. Whatever the truth is, I don't see how it will help me get food on the table." I would imagine that that's kind of how it happens in the real world too. That's why regimes can go on for as long as they do, is because your average person believes that they cannot make a difference and is just struggling to eat. Oh, that makes me feel sad to think about that. But anyways, luckily, in the world of the Hunger Games, that's about to change. Because the second book is literally called Catching Fire. Katniss is literally about to figuratively about to catch on fire and blow up in the Capitol space. Kind of like the Mockingjay did. Segue! Okay, so the second symbol that I want to talk about, the Mockingjay. Over the course of the trilogy, we see that this symbol is thrust upon Katniss by other characters. As Katniss becomes the political face of the resistance, she becomes the Mockingjay. So we learn that back in the war days, the Capitol scientists genetically engineered a breed of birds called jabberjays. Jabberjays can mimic entire human conversations. So the Capitol sends them to go spy on the resistance, and the birds come back and start feeding the Capitol information. As soon as the rebels realize what's going on and catch on to this, they start feeding the birds lies, and as soon as the Capitol realizes they've been compromised, they stop using the jabberjays. They let them all out into the wild, and there they mate with wild mockingbirds to create a brand new species called the Mockingjay. The Mockingjay is a bird that can recreate both human voices and birdsong melodies. This is the perfect example, something that the Capitol initially tried to use to their advantage, that ends up spinning completely out of their control. They have devised this world, this society, where they have given themselves all of the power. They are seen as almost an omniscient, ever-present force. That's the kind of fear that's instilled in the average population of Panem. And this power relies pretty much entirely on the world believing that they are that powerful. But the Mockingjay proves that they're fallible. It's an unintended result of their own scheming that ends up biting them in the butt. And Katniss, the Mockingjay, proves to be their ultimate downfall. They try to use her as a pawn in this game of brutality and oppression. They try to force her to play their Hunger Games, but she eventually spins out of their control, not just using her smarts, her wits, her intelligence, or her survival instincts, but also her sense of empathy, her sense of humanity, and the support of the people who love her. These are the things that propel Katniss's transformation into something entirely out of the Capitol's control. The Mockingjay, the leader of a movement that will eventually topple this oppressive regime. But as much credit as Katniss deserves, she did not get there alone, and that brings me to the third symbol I want to talk about in this video, RUE'S song. Okay, so here's the thing. The first time I read these books, I definitely did not have enough appreciation for Rue as a character. Upon a reread, I believe that Rue played a major role in the rebellion. She's not just some minor character from book 1. She's not just some sad thing that happens along the way. I don't even know if the resistance would have started if not for Rue. I think her death is one of the most powerful catalysts that ends up sparking the entire rebellion. So Rue and Katniss team up midway through the games. The career tributes have been stockpiling food, and Katniss and Rue figure out a scheme to try to blow up their supplies and level out the playing field again, but their plan requires them to split up for the afternoon. So Rue teaches Katniss this simple 4-note melody. This melody comes from District 11, where Rue is from. It means it's the end of the workday, it's quitting time. If you've watched the movies, or if you've even just heard the trailers, then you already know what this melody sounds like. I don't know if I can include it without getting a copyright strike. I still don't really know how copyright strikes work on YouTube, but if you know it, whistle it with me. Oh. Oh, that was pretty good. Okay. So Rue teaches Katniss this melody that she can sing to the Mockingjays, and the Mockingjays will transmit the message through the forest, and then when Rue hears those notes, she'll know that Katniss is okay, and vice versa. But as we all know, something goes wrong, and Rue is caught in a trap and speared. I'm trying to figure out a gentler way to say that. She's attacked with a spear. Katniss gets there in time to fend off the attacker, aka to kill the attacker, which is actually the first time Katniss kills somebody actively in the game, and she notices that later and has to kind of process that. But anyways, Katniss gets there just in time to fend off the attacker, sing Rue to sleep, to her last sleep, and give her a proper send-off by covering her body in flowers and honoring her in what small way she can before the game makers retrieve her body from the arena. Something happens here. When my little brother and I first got our mom to watch the movies with us, she broke down at this scene. She was crying and she just kept saying, "It's not fair, it's not fair." And I mean, my little brother and I were like, Well, yeah, I mean, that's the point, but that is the point. It's not fair. And that moment moved my mom, and within the story, that moment moved a lot of people as well. Part of the way the Capitol stays in power is by keeping the districts separate and silent. There's not really any real cross-district communication. We know this because in the book, as Katniss and Rue are getting to know more about each other and enjoying learning about each other's lifestyles, they're asking a lot of questions. We can tell that they're learning new things about the other person's district. And Katniss even makes a note of this. She's like, you know what, I bet the game makers are not broadcasting this because I don't think that they want anyone at home to start getting curious about how other people in Panem live. So there's no way to organize, there's no way to rise up, there's no way to recognize your common enemy. The districts can't see each other as allies because the only time they ever have any kind of meaningful interaction, they're being pitted against one another as competitors in these awful Hunger Games. Katniss and Gale talk about the divide and conquer strategy at the beginning of the book, a way to plant hatred between the starving workers of the seam and those who can generally count on supper and thereby ensure we will never trust one another. It's to the Capitol's advantage to have us divided among ourselves. Yeah, the other thing the Capitol likes to do is totally dehumanize people. And not only that, force them to dehumanize each other. We can take your power, we can take your life, and in the end, we can even take your humanity. We see this all over the place. When Katniss is first selected for the games, Gale tries to tell her, no, you have a chance, you're a good hunter, it's just hunting. And Katniss is like, no, it's not just hunting. And later when she's processing the fact that she did kill somebody with an arrow, she talks about how in the execution, it was the same, but the aftermath is totally different. It's not just hunting. You've taken a human's life. Later on, Katniss kind of freaks herself out after she hears that Thresh has been killed in the games. She thinks of it as a murder. Even just that phrasing really freaks her out. The muttations at the end of the books, oh my gosh, the movies did them so dirty. In the books, the mutts that chase the tributes at the end are the most terrifying things I've ever heard. They're like wolves that can stand on their hind legs. Katniss realizes that they have the same eyes as the tributes that died, and she's like so freaked out. She's wondering, how did they get their eyeballs? Is that real? The reason that's so disturbing is because you have taken a human and turned them into something entirely different. You've removed their humanity from them. And before the games begin, we can see that Peeta is worried about this. I think it's the night before they enter the Hunger Games. I should have marked it, I can't find it. I want to die as myself. Does that make any sense? I don't want them to change me in there, turn me into some kind of monster that I'm not. When the time comes, I'm sure I'll kill just like everybody else. I can't go down without a fight. Only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their game. Katniss doesn't get it. She's like, but you are a piece in the games and you gotta deal with that. This is the way it is. But then she does get it. With Rue. With Rue, Katniss goes through something of a character transformation. This is an incredibly important character moment from the book. Rue's death has forced me to confront my own fury against the cruelty, the injustice they inflict upon us. But here, even more strongly than at home, I feel my impotence. There's no way to take revenge on the Capitol. Is there? Then I remember Peeta's words on the roof, and for the first time I understand what he means. I want to do something, right here, right now, to shame them, to make them accountable, to show the Capitol that whatever they do or force us to do, there is a part of every tribute they can't own, that Rue was more than a piece of their games, and so am I. Yes, that's the good stuff. Yes, Katniss sees Prim in Rue, but she also just sees Rue as a person. She humanizes Rue by honoring her in death. Essentially, she mourns Rue's death like the people who loved Rue would have mourned her death. And that moment changes the game. From that point on, it's game over for the game makers, because suddenly with that act, it's so much more apparent to everyone watching that Katniss is not the enemy. It's the people who forced this to happen, not the people who let this happen, the people who made this happen. This is a turning point. And after it happens, the people of District 11 send Katniss a sponsorship gift to let her know that they're thankful for what she did. She notes that this has literally never been done before in 74 years worth of games. Never before has one district sent a gift to a tribute from another district. And this kind of cross-district solidarity is an important step for the resistance. From this point forward, the rebellion is a ticking time bomb. Yes, it starts small, it takes a while to pick up speed, but it's happening. It's happening. The next time we hear Katniss whistle Rue's song, it's actually right before the end of the games. It's literally moments before Cato bursts out onto the cornucopia field being chased by the mutts. Quitting time. The song still embodies quitting time. Thus far in the story, it has always preceded the end of something. The first time we hear it, it's the end of Rue's life. The next time we hear it, it's the end of the games. And from this point forward, it's going to mean the end of the regime, because after this point, Rue's song becomes not only a symbol of the resistance, but a reminder of why. We are living in the kind of world that sends children to be violently murdered and televises it for the entire nation to watch. No more. It's quitting time. That's something that I really love about these books and about this story. These are very violent books, don't get me wrong. They're very violent. They're about oppression and corruption and war. But at their core, they are very staunchly anti all of these things. It does not glorify trauma. It critiques the ways that we glorify trauma, and it examines the real ways that it affects us. And in the end, the real weapon that defeats an evil regime is not violence or vengeance. It is selflessness, empathy, and the courage to rise together. Okay, that's it. That's all I want to say about the symbols of the Hunger Games. It's actually not, but if I kept talking, this video would be too long for anybody to watch. So if you like this analysis, please stick around and subscribe. I tried to do something a little different this time from my first 2 videos I have on BookTube. So if you have any feedback for this kind of more researched and prepared video format, please let me know in the comments. I would love to keep improving. I don't know how to finish a video about a horrible, oppressive regime. This doesn't seem like the way to do it, but it's how it's happening. Okay, bye. I'll keep you safe in this house tonight. Hold on to me, pretty baby, and just